Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Chrissy Hodges, advocate for Pure OCD, the community name for individuals who live with intrusive thoughts and mental rituals. I am an advocate and a certified peer support specialist working with people all over the world, providing support in any stage of recovery that you are at. I can also provide referrals for therapists anywhere in the world. NOCD is an app. Inside their app, you can find all kinds of resources to help with OCD, and you can meet other people that live with OCD to help you feel less alone. They also do telehealth through doing ERP in many places all over the world. So check them out at nocd.com or treatmyocd.com. I wanted to, just in reflecting in the last video I did with Dr. Steven Phillipson, if you haven't seen it, it was a live, so you can go to my channel and click live videos, and that was one that I recorded with him a couple weeks ago. It was really informative and really great to meet with him. If you don't know, Dr. Steven Phillipson was my therapist 27 years ago. 27 years ago. So it's very cathartic to be able to talk with him and to have him come speak at events that I run at some in different places. So I think you'll enjoy it. But in doing that video, it just kind of sparked in me realizing that I haven't really shared my story here in a really long time. And so I have a lot of new followers over the last few years. And so I just thought I would take today to share my story. If you've already heard it, you probably don't want to listen to this video. You'll just be bored. But it's also, if you don't want to watch a video of it, you can read it in my memoir, Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. This follows my life from the day that OCD showed up for me and through treatment. And it was really special to be able to write that several years ago and share that with you. But I thought I would take some time today to talk a little bit about my experience. You hear a lot from me on different topics. I have a lot of topics I'm going to be doing in the coming weeks that are just, I think, crucial to lived experience and what we all go through. But I don't talk a lot about what I went through specifically, so I wanted to share that with you today. So when I was 8 years old, OCD showed up for me in the form of emetophobia. So that is the fear of vomiting. Well, literally, my life changed within 1 second. I was sitting in third grade at the desk and everything seemed fine. And then all of a sudden I started to panic, and when someone had thrown up in the classroom. And that was my first panic attack that I can recall. It was right beside me, so I lunged over across this dude's lap in the desk next to me, and I hit the floor. I was on the floor, and in a state of panic, I could not move, and I had no idea what was going on. I was terrified. So I had to create some sort of rituals to kind of get me out of that haze as everyone was staring at me and starting to laugh because Chrissy was on the floor and couldn't move. The teacher came and helped me up and took me to the back of the room, and I was terrified of my desk. I was terrified of that area, and now the classroom was contaminated. Everything was contaminated, and now I am subjected to these germs. I'd never experienced this before, understand? Never had any fears whatsoever about throwing up or other people throwing up or anything. So this was very shocking to me. And in my brain, my 8-year-old brain, the only thing that I knew is this is bad. Something bad is happening to me. And in my brain, I thought bad things happen to bad people. I know that's not true. But at 8 years old, my worldview was religion, and I was very entrenched in those beliefs of, you do good, and, you don't sin, and you don't do bad things, and good things happen. I don't know why I thought that, but so I thought I must have done something bad to sin against God. And that's when the religious scrupulosity started. And that's when most of my rituals started to revolve around God and prayer and making sure I was doing all of the right things, being the best possible religious person that I could, not doing anything wrong, not sinning. I was repenting all the time. I had prayer rituals. And a lot of it was monitoring my behavior on whether it was good and bad, so I wouldn't get punished with these bad thoughts, with these bad feelings, with the anxiety, because I didn't know what it was. Now, a very important point here is this. On that day, going home, I did not tell my mother what was going on. I mean, I was riddled all day with misery, but there was some part of me, for many different reasons I'm not going to go into here on this video, and hopefully I can go into it in my next book. I knew that I should not say what was going on out loud. As a child, even at 8 years old, I just knew that probably wouldn't benefit me in any way, and it wouldn't be taken seriously. But also there was an element of, if I just go to sleep, maybe this will go away. This was just a bad day. Again, subscribing to that religious scrupulosity piece. I just did something wrong. I need to repent enough to where this would go away. So my life became entrenched in compulsions from that day forward, and I kept it a secret. This was when I was 8, so this continued for years, the fear of vomit. But in that time, before I developed the big one, when I was 14, I had all kinds of intrusive thoughts that terrified me, that I knew felt the same way as the fear of vomit. But I couldn't piece it together. I just, again, subscribed to that religious scrupulosity. I must have just done something worse, and now I have this fear that I'm going to harm children. Now I have this fear that I'm going to hurt my cat. I had the fear of demon possession. I had fears about people breaking into the house. So I would check locks at night. So all kinds of things that were just there, and I remember experiencing them, but they didn't latch on like the fear of the vomit. And then, of course, they didn't latch on like the next fear. When I was 14 years old, in high school, life was going great. I was a normal, everyday high school kid. And I had something bad happen, right? I didn't make the cheerleading team. That might not seem like a big deal to you or to anybody, but it was a big deal to me. It was kind of my identity at that point. And so when I didn't make it, there was a lot of grief, and I didn't know how to experience grief. And so OCD showed up. So you need to grieve? Okay, here, come over here, and we're going to make you think, what if I'm gay? And that's exactly what happened. I was spending the night with a friend. We were having a conversation about sex, which normal 14, 15-year-olds do, right? And in my brain, I was like, I shouldn't be talking about this. I was thinking about the religious scrupulosity, like this subject is off limits. I'm going to get in trouble for talking about this. I shouldn't even be thinking about it. So I barely even talked about it. I just kind of listened. And then my friend told me she'd had sex, and I was just fucking mad. I remember thinking, like, why can everybody else do what they want and I can't do anything, or I feel like I'm getting punished by something? And the cogs started turning a little bit, like, maybe this stuff isn't real. Maybe this is something different. And I guess OCD did not appreciate that and thought, really, well, we're going to double down now. So that evening when I was going to sleep, I was in the other room in her house, and I was thinking about it. I was really upset. And then all of a sudden, like, I had this image pop in my head of her having sex with someone. And I was like, whoa, don't want to think about that. No. And then it wouldn't go away. And I was like, why can't I stop thinking about my friend naked, right? Or like her boyfriend naked or whatever. And then all of a sudden my brain went, maybe you're gay. And I remember that moment. And I know y'all all remember the moment that the big one hit. It was like someone lit a match underneath my head and my brain, and it caught on fire. And I just was like, wait, what? And I dropped to my knees on the ground, and like on all fours. I was like, wait a minute, what just happened? Did something just happen? And I was like, I'm not gay. I don't like women, and I don't want to be gay. I'm boy crazy. I have a boyfriend. He's great. And I'm also going to tell you this was in the 1990s. Was it? Yes, 90s, early 90s in the South, religious. I didn't give a shit who was gay. I did not care. It didn't matter. Whatever people wanted to do, I would have been supportive of that. And in fact, if I was gay, I would have been supportive of myself. But I just knew I wasn't. It was just this bizarre feeling of going, oh my God, but why would I think this if it wasn't true? Now, there was a moment where I went, wait a minute, this feels a lot like the fear of vomit. I mean, same thing, like feeling in the back of my neck, really hot, my chest was caving in, felt that panic. And I thought, what is going on? Like, how are those two things related? But again, it just felt so real that it didn't matter. And then the religious scrupulosity came barreling in and was just like, you must have done something really wrong to now have this kind of feeling and this kind of panic and all of this. So I thought, oh my God, like, the vomit is worn off and now something new came in, and there's this punishment from God or whatever. You make sense of whatever, however you need to make sense. Again, I ain't telling anybody, but I remember the next morning when I woke up and it was still there. Mom came and picked me up. I remember getting in the car and putting the seatbelt on and feeling this deep, dark sense of doom. It was over. I was like, now that I've thought that, there's no way out of this. I mean, and to me, it was, I'm never telling anybody that I had these thoughts. I mean, in my mind, telling someone I had the thoughts meant admitting that this could be true, and I knew it wasn't. And I was scared that it was true, and I was going to be forced to live a life that I didn't want to live. And there was a lot of grief there. I, really loved the idea of, being with a dude and like at some point probably having sex and getting married. And in no way did I think to myself that you're a lesbian and I would be okay with that, not because there's anything wrong with it, but just because I knew it wasn't what I wanted. And I thought, oh no, is this something that's going to be with me the rest of my life and I have to hide it? Or is this who I really am and I'm just refusing to see it? It was so confusing. Let me remind you, there was no internet in the 90s, okay? In the early 90s especially. So this is not something that I can, for those of you that grew up with the internet, you're like, what did you do? Like, what did you do with your time? I don't know. I don't know what I did with my time. I played Atari, watched TV. I could not go home and Google, what are these intrusive thoughts? There was nothing. I'm not going to go and find an encyclopedia and look shit up or like ask people. I just wasn't going to do it. So I made this covenant pact with myself. You're never going to tell anybody that this happened. The same way I wasn't going to tell anybody that I had fears of vomit. I wasn't going to do it. Or the religious scrupulosity. And a lot of it was, I was worried that if I told about the religious scrupulosity, and then my dad was a minister, he'd find out that God was punishing me in these weird ways, then I would be shunned, or I would be shamed, or he would be disappointed in me. He'd find out I'm not this religious person, or my beliefs aren't good enough. I don't know. Everything was so confusing. So that became my life. And here's how it happened over the next 6 years. These big waves would come. Waves of doom and haze. Sometimes it would break and I would feel okay. And I would think, this is silly. Like, it would always be in the back of my head, but I would think to myself, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I want. I don't know why I think about this all the time. But then when the wave would hit, and it could be anything. It could be the time of month. It could be the time of year. The summers were horrible for me because I wasn't in school. And so I had a lot of time at home by myself. So my brain would go wild with kind of boredom. Again, no internet. And so, I did have like a side job or whatever, but it didn't matter. When those waves would hit, I now reflect, and they were riddled with depression. I have no idea how I made it through. Because again, remember, I didn't know what was going on. I really just believed that this was going on in my brain and this was real and there was some punishment coming down from God. And I remember when it got really bad one time, and I would count the days until that haze and doom would break. That's what I would call it. And if they got longer than it was before, I would get so scared. Like, it's not going to break this time, and I'm going to be forced to, believe that this is real. And I'm going to be forced to say this stuff out loud. And I made this pact with myself. I was like, I'm never going to. And if it ever gets bad enough, I'm just going to kill myself. Now, I know that seems extreme, and I know that you're probably thinking, well, that was stupid. You should have just asked for help. But if you have OCD and and you've dealt with this stuff for this long, and you suffer to the degree where you feel like there is no way out, just like Phillipson said on the video before, your brain starts looking for other solutions to end the suffering. And again, I did not have an outlet to even know this was OCD. I didn't even know it was a brain disorder. It felt so real back then. And we did not talk about mental health in my family. And no one was talking about mental health in school back then in the 90s. Nobody. In fact, it was so stigmatized. You don't even mention it. So it was just me alone with all of this. And my brain just was like, if this isn't sustainable, you're just going to have to kill yourself. As matter of factly. Did I want to? Hell no. I loved life. I loved life when I wasn't in that haze and depression, and it was so sad. And I had this full persona that everybody thought that I was. They thought that I was this jovial, friendly. I mean, I was like, it's not like I was pretending. I was this outgoing, in all these clubs, athlete, you know, had a ton of friends, loving life. And they had no idea the depths I was suffering. I mean, I could be like in your face, happy and yada, yada, yada. And people just didn't know that there was this dark hole in me that sometimes I was just screaming to get out of. So I dealt with this for another 6 years, from 14 to 20. So this is 12 years in total. I went to college again, like, straight A student. I got, I was on the cross country team. I was in the sorority, yada, yada, yada. And I had a tragedy happen when I was 20. My cousin died. He was one of my best friends, and it was a tragic death. And again, this grief came in, and I did not know how to grieve, and I did not know how to process it, and I did not know how to complete any emotions. And so OCD just came in and took over. It was about 6 months after his death that I really fell down into the deepest, darkest hole that I've ever been in my life. And this is where I started. The depression was so real. This was in the fall of my junior year of college. And all of the signs were there of like suicidality, right? I stopped showering. I stopped going out. I spent most time in my room. I wasn't sleeping. I lost weight. It was, in these days, someone would have said, she's in trouble. We need to help her. But nobody knew what to do back then, right? I didn't know what to do back then. I didn't know how to ask for help. I was just praying that it would go away like it usually did, but this time was different. I started bargaining, because I had religious scrupulosity. I thought that I was like talking right here to God. So I started bargaining. I started saying things with God, like, just give me a sign, and then something would happen. And I'd be like, oh my God, that is a sign. I'm going to be okay or whatever. And then there was this one day I had to go home for Christmas break. It was 6 weeks because it was like the quarter system. So we had longer breaks. And I knew, y'all, that 6 weeks was going to be, I was at great risk of suicide. And so I was scared, and I was crying I lived in the sorority house. And I was crying in my room before my ride got there, and I bargained. And I said, if God, obviously I've done something so horrible to offend you, and you're giving me all these thoughts, and I'm so miserable. This is what I thought with religious scrupulosity. Remember this. I said, give me a sign if, you think that I shouldn't keep going on, or if this is over, or if this is whatever. And so I felt good about that, right? So I go home. Sorry, my dogs are barking. I go home, and Mom has cooked dinner or whatever, and she turns on 2020. For those of you that are a little older, you may remember this. It was like 1997, I think, 96 or 97. No, it was 97. And there was, this special came on, and it was like, da da da. And it was like lesbians in their 50s. And it was like women who were married and then now realized they were lesbians, and they came out in their 50s. And I was just like, I mean, I laugh now, but I mean, talk about that moment of doom. I literally was just like, oh my God, there's the sign, right? And I remember going into the bathroom and staring in the mirror. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And I was looking at myself, and I was like, I don't even know who this is. I was in the haze so deep. I'd never been in the haze like that before in my life. And I was so scared. But to me, I believed this religious scrupulosity narrative. So to me, it just made all sense. Remember, there was no internet. I could not get on the internet and be like, what are these thoughts? I just had to endure it. So I don't want to get into detail, but I did end up attempting suicide. And it was brutal, and I was very lucky to survive. I was hospitalized, and that was tough because it forced me to have to come out and tell people about what had been going on, this secret I had been keeping for 12 years. I was so scared I would be misunderstood. I was so scared people would think I was delusional, because I'm sitting here going, God punishes me with bad thoughts. Like, that just sounds, it sounds bonkers. And so, but I was lucky. I was in a locked facility, suicide watch for a while. And um, I was lucky I had a therapist that just put all the pieces together and said, this sounds like OCD. And I was like, I was relieved, and then I was really angry. And I can talk about that in a later video in a couple months when I do a follow-up to this. I was very angry. This is a brain disorder. Like, I have just suffered for 12 years alone, and all this is a brain disorder. I don't even know who I am. I have this convoluted relationship with religion. I was just fucking mad. Like, are you serious? Like, I have suffered day in and day out for so long just to find out this is a disorder that can be treated, even though, of course, I didn't believe it was. Like we all do. I was like, oh, yeah, it's OCD. And then I was like, maybe I'm the one that doesn't have it. So I went into that too. But anyway, the anger kind of quickly passed, and I tried to move into acceptance, but the anger came back later, and that's a whole other video. And I got on medication, and medication was really helpful for me. It allowed me to get stable enough to go back to school. I didn't tell anybody what had happened. None of my friends, no one knew anything. They just knew, I went on Christmas break and then came back, which was hella bizarre because I had to have surgery. And then I was in a hospital for weeks. I mean, it was bizarre to go back and be like, hey, how was your Christmas? That was fucked up. So I relapsed a year later. So I went off of medication thinking that I could outthink it. If I know that this is OCD, then I can just know when the thoughts come in. But as we know, when it feels so real, you can know it's OCD. You can know it's OCD, but you can't feel yourself into believing it's the disorder. So at that point, we did have AOL dial-up. It was 1998, I believe. And so I searched on AOL dial-up for days. Any combination of like OCD, vomit, OCD, religion, OCD, being gay, things like that, or, fears of being gay or whatever. By the way, I'm not trying to stigmatize that, because the sexual orientation OCD can go any way. It can be you are gay and you are worried you are straight. You are gay, you're worried you're bi. You're bi, you're worried you're gay. You're bi, you're worried you're straight. So this is just the form that I got with sexual orientation OCD. So anyway, I found Dr. Stephen Phillipson. He had his website on AOL was like OCD Zone. And I read Thinking the Unthinkable, and the first paragraph was Bob was having sex with his wife, and as he was climaxing, his friend Fred popped in his head. I was like, oh my God, these are my people. I contacted Phillipson. I was lucky that he could get me in over phone sessions, and I was lucky to be able to afford it back then. My family helped support me in doing that therapy, so and it was successful. And so I was able to learn how to manage it through exposure response prevention therapy. And, what I want to say is, and then life was happily ever after, but it wasn't, going through what I went through for 12 years, having no idea what it was traumatic. And so, the subsequent years after therapy were very tough from a grief standpoint, from an anger standpoint. And I am, it's 27 years later. I'm still working on my recovery. I'm still working on finding out who Chrissy is after not being able to find out for those years, and, kind of being a slave to this horrible illness in my brain. I just wanted you to know that that's my story. And I probably did not convey the degree of suffering that I experienced. I don't really think that I need to. I think that I understand, and I know that you get it. But it was the worst thing I've ever been through in my life. There were dark moments in my latter teen years that I thought that I would never escape. I would never get out of that dark hole. And there are moments I think back on and I just shudder. I can't even remember. I have no idea how I'm going to get emotional. I have no idea how I survived. Sometimes when I'm triggered now and I am triggered for a couple days, and it feels the same. I'm like, I got to get out of this right now. I got to get out of this. It needs to be better. I can't feel this way. And I think back on that young, poor kid when I was 8 and that young teenager. And I have no idea how the resilience, where that resilience in that fight came from to keep going every day, day in and day out with zero hope. Um, I am absolutely proud of her and am in awe of her, and simultaneously feel disgusted by myself at that time. And I'm working on learning to love that part of me as well. Disgusted meaning like, why didn't you tell somebody? Why didn't you ask for help? Like, we didn't have to suffer that long, things like that. And I work on those things all the time. I work on self-love. I work on self-compassion, and I'm doing everything I can to be more compassionate towards that kid that I wish would have done things differently. Anyway, I'm sorry to get emotional. I didn't realize I was going to. But I do want to end with this. I cover a lot of hard topics on this channel. And I know sometimes it may seem like I'm not promoting hope when I say you're going to have this the rest of your life, or, it's okay if you still do compulsions or whatever. But my hope comes from the realistic portrayal of OCD. And that realistic portrayal comes from my experience and the people I meet with all over the world, whether that be one-on-one or in groups or people I meet at my events. And I draw inspiration and hope from them the same way I hope that you draw that from me. I'm not going to sit up here and portray a picture of OCD of the day that you get diagnosed and treated, your life is going to be perfect. I can't do that because that is not the case for me. What I can tell you is that I have a relationship with OCD right now that is not torturous. It is not distressing all the time. I am not miserable, and I do not suffer the way that I did before. I've settled into a relationship with it, kind of mutual respect. Sometimes it crosses boundaries. But I have a great life, and I've gone through lots of stages of recovery, and I just continue to grow. And that's what I want for you. There is no, I want to convey too, there doesn't have to be an urgency with recovery. This, I need to get better just so life can be good right now, because that's not how recovery happens. For me, there are things I've learned in the last 5 years I was incapable of learning in my 30s, incapable in my 20s. So I try to take the lens of being exploratory, objective, and curious. How much deeper in this recovery can I get? How much more can I know who Chrissy is? And what do I need to do to get to that place? That's what I hope for you. And I hope that hearing my story and hearing where I'm at now, and I will talk more a little bit about my lived experience moving forward, because I think it's important for you to know who you're relating to and what my life has been like with OCD too. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having compassion for what I've been through and receiving this as well. I appreciate you so much, and just know that I'm here for you. If you need peer support, referral consultations, I'm at chrissyhodges.com. Thanks for being here.